Hello everyone, welcome to next session of our training. In this particular session, we are going to learn data structure of SAP system. What I mean by data structure of SAP system means that how the data is being saved in our SAP system. We've seen in general, in a very basic way, we can see what kind of data has been saved in SAP system. Basically, it is tables where you can save the data, and you have programs. These are all basic things what is available in a SAP system. You have tables and programs. So here what we are going to see how this is being saved or how we can create this kind of data in SAP system and what is the impact. Let's say if you say tables are specific to client, we call this as client specific, and you can also have some table entries with this cross client tables. So these kind of things, when you create a program or when you edit a program, what is going to be the impact? So we call this workbench. So these kind of differences, how these data are managed in the SAP system, when you create this kind of data, what is the impact? So if you want to understand this structure of SAP system, how these are being saved, so it is very important to understand this specific concept. Basically, this is the very basic concept of how data is being saved. So it's very important to understand. As a basis consultant, it's really important because even though ABAP or functional who develop the system, they know this concept well. However, what is the impact of creating the program? This all may not be known to the people. So if you see in smaller systems or smaller landscape or an organization, you mostly see basis will be the person who will give the final approval to say, okay, this specific change can go to production or it cannot go to production. What will be the impact? This analysis will be done by some cases by basis. So if you want to understand this, then you need to understand how this data is being created, how it is being saved, how it can be transported, and what is the impact. So this is very important to understand. So once you understand this very clearly, then you can say, okay, this specific change does not have any impact if you go to productive system. Okay, so let's begin. In this slide, you can see how an ABAP stack is being built in an SAP system. Before, we have seen central instance and application instance and different instance, and it is built on top of a database. It could be an Oracle database or any other database or a HANA database. All application instance as well as the central instance with the database together, we call it as one SAP system. For example, our SAP system which we used it before is a system called ECC. This is one system which have only central instance. If you want to have additional instances, we can add it there. So it is one ECC system. Now we are talking about different clients in the system. So in our ECC system, we have only one client. The client which we are using is 001. The reason is because it is a fresh system. In general, when you install an SAP system, a fresh SAP system, you will have two clients. Client 000, this is a client which we should not use it often. This does not save any data. Then it will have a client called 001 by default. This we call as golden client. So we generally, what we do is we copy that client 001, then we copy it into different client. We can see it here. The example is client 100 as well as client 200. Depending on the requirement, we can create multiple clients. So we copy that client 001 and create additional clients. So the client 001 which we are using is golden client. In general, nobody saves any data or nobody uses that client 001 as it is to save any business data. Since this is a standard client, we generally keep the client as it is and we create additional clients, then use that client. So for example, after some time, after some years you decided you wanted to have an additional client in the SAP system. So let's say we created the client 100 and we are using all the data in 100. After some years your business decided that you wanted to have an additional client. Then what you can do is you can simply copy the client 001, which does not have any data. There is no customizing inside there. It's a fresh client. Then you can simply copy it and make a new client. That's the reason the client 001 is kept as it is. Technical perspective, you can use that client. There is no problem. Yeah, like we are using it now for our training purpose. We can simply use it. You can save all data. You can do whatever we like in the way we do in other clients. So there's no problem. The reason why we keep it fresh in a real-time scenario, that is simply because we can copy it later. But if you see in bigger systems, in larger corporates, the client 001 will not be kept as it is. Because of security reason, they will delete this client. Okay, if it is required, then we could also create client from here, copy of this one with customizing data or without customizing data. We can do that. There is a lot of options. We can do that. We will come to that later. How do we do the client copy in later sessions? Now we need to understand how the client is being used and why we use it like this. You may think, anyway, why do we need to have an additional client? That is also a very important topic. If you see some systems, the design is like that. People use one client for one specific some set of modules in SAP, and they will use another client for some set of modules in SAP. But that also will have complication in the later stage until unless it is necessary. For example, HR could be in a different client because there is the integration between other logistic function to HR may be different. Okay, because in the HR you don't need all users to be in HR, and you have very sensitive data, so you don't want to keep all users in one that's same client. You want to keep it separate, then you can keep it separate. Still there is a lot of integration, like in from SD there will be integration to HR for example for overtimes, and you also need, let's say if you wanted to find who is a sales employee from SD, if you would like to link it to HR in SD, also you can use HR OMs. So there is integration, but still it is less. So in this kind of scenario you can separate it, but it is still a business decision whether they wanted to keep separated by module wise. Based on my experience, I will say if it is the same company, it should not be separated because it will create some complexity. Then why should we do that? In some companies you will have a legal requirement, okay, that to keep all the data separate from the other legal identity. Okay, it's depending on the country where you are operating your business. So you will have legal requirements. Let's say you have a legal identity for two different companies, then these data should not be mixed together. If that is the case, you can create a separate client. And that will be very easy because you just create a separate client. You have all the customizing programs, everything, and create a separate client. Now we will see what is in this client. So this client contains the client specific data. First thing is client specific customizing data. What is client specific customizing data? So whenever we are creating, for example, a company code or a plant or a profit center, cost center, these are all customizing data. These data will be specific to client, that specific client. Let's say if I create a company code in client 100, this specific company code will be only available in client 100. Okay, let's say we talked about two different legal identities, right? So in that case we have company code 1000. There is one company code. We have another company code called 2000. So if you create a company code in client 100, say 1000, that will be only available here. company code 200 will be available only in the client 200. Same like users also. The users also client specific information as well as the roles. We will also use a user, and roles will also be created by basis consultant. In that case, the user created in client 100 will not have access to client 200. You need a separate user. So the user who is in client 100 will have access to only that specific company code, or we can also restrict within the client using authorization object what needs to be seen by the specific user. However, the repository wise they have access to only these data. So the user and the roles also a client specific data or client specific information. The user and role objects does not actually comes into client specific customizing or application data. This is kind of a master data, but it is not really a customizing data as well. But whenever you create a role, it will be a customizing object, but still it will be different than the standard customizing. Okay, that is a different topic. We will come to that later. The application wise, the application data that for example the service orders or the sales order or the invoices, whatever you are creating from one specific client will be available only in that specific client. This cannot be accessed by the user from other client by any kind of authorization if you are giving. Okay, the difference is, for example, here you have 5 company codes. Let's say in the client 100 you have 5 company codes. You create a user, you can give access to that user to access the data only for one specific company code, or you can have another user who will access 3 company codes, or you will have another user who will access all company codes. Okay, you can restrict that by authorization. The other way, if this user would like to see the data in client 200, there is not at all possible. You need to have an additional user in client 200. Otherwise, we cannot log into that specific client 200 and access the data. Okay, that is a different. This is client specific data, client specific customizing, client specific application data, as well as user master data. Then let's come to cross-client customizing. What is cross-client customizing? The customizing are generally done by the functional team. For example, when you install a fresh SAP system, of course, you need to configure the system. The configuration, we call this customizing, creating company codes, creating plans, creating cost centers, profit center. These are all called customizing data. This is specific to client. Then we have cross-client customizing. What is this cross-client customizing? Let's say you will also do some changes. Basically, the changes which is related to client. For example, you create a client. So this customizing should be known to all the clients, of course, because if you go to client 100 and see how many clients you have, you need to know how many clients you have. That means that specific information needs to be available for all clients. This is called cross-client customizing. In general, what is customizing? Customizing is basically when you create, for example, company code. So it will create a entry in a table with that company code name with all the information which you give. So that is called customizing. So when you create a client also, that you create an entry in table T00, this is the table which contains all the information about the client. So when you create a client, it will create an entry in the table T00. Okay, that table information will be available in all clients. So that is a cross-client customizing. Like this in functional also they have some customizing, like factory calendars. So the factory calendars is basically should be available in all clients. So this is cross-client information. Then let's come to repository objects. What is repository objects? The repository objects are like table definitions, programs, transaction, and function modules. What is table definition? Uh, Table definition means the structure of a specific table, how the table is being created. For example, what are all the fields it has, and what is the characteristic of this specific field, and what is the length, and so on. So the table definition is a cross-client object. The repository objects are cross-client objects. So the repository object, we call it workbench objects. Okay, these are all customizing. This is workbench. The workbench means the programs. Programs is a workbench. The programs means whenever you change any program, that will affect all these clients. Let's say you have a program to display the company codes. So you change the program, then it will affect all the clients. So the program, when you execute it from client 00 also will be same, and client 200 also will be same, and client 300 also will be same. So this is very important to understand. So the programs will affect all the clients because it is a repository object. This is applicable for all clients. So the table definitions are, for example, let's say the company code. Company code is saved in a table T001. We wanted to change the definition of the table. You wanted to add an additional field when you are creating a company code. When you create a company code, generally you have company code and the description and the address and so on and so forth. Let's take a example, just an example. Create example. Let's say we wanted to add a location information of Google, for example. Let's say from Google we wanted to put the location information somewhere there. In that case, we can create an additional field in the table. So as soon as you create the additional field, then that additional field will be available in all clients. So that's a table definition. You are changing the table definition. Then transaction. Transaction is nothing but the transaction codes which will be used to execute a program. Then also function module. What is there in the repository by any way, you will have programs and tables which is categorized for each different modules. Okay, this is applicable or available in all clients. The technology is basically for the basis stuff. To run the system, we have quite a lot of things which we also seen it before. We have so many programs which is related to basis, which will also be available in the repository object. Then we have in-house development in the customizing namespace. In general, SAP have most of the programs and the tables which you need. However, SAP will also allow you to create your own programs. If you see in any system, the programs are starting with Y or Z or coming from the customer itself. So customer can develop additional program, and customer also can create additional tables if they wanted to save any information which is not available in SAP. Then you can create a Z table. Okay, this is in-house developments. So this will also be available in the repository object, which will also affect the clients, all the clients. Okay, that is the repository objects. Now let's see what is system landscape. Here in this picture you can see a 3 system landscape. What is 3 system landscape? In a SAP system, you will have different SAP system for different purpose. In the 3 system landscape, you have 3 different systems. Let's say one is for development, one is for testing, another one is for production. So production is the system where the end user is going to use in order to run any transaction or keep any transactional data. And if you see in the quality system, where you will test the quality of the specific changes which you have done. In the development system, which will be used for developing any changes. Why do we need to have 3 different systems? So why don't we do the development directly in the system, in the productive system? We can do technically, but when you do any changes in the development system, that program will be affected. So let's say you have a system, or you are working in a company where you have more than 5,000 users. working in the same ERP system. In that case, you have no way to make any changes in the productive system. Anything goes wrong during the period when you are making the changes will affect the entire user and it will affect your system itself. Or it's also possible when you are doing these kind of changes, it can affect and it can also affect the data of your systems. So in the general scenarios, typical recommended scenario from SAP, you have a three system landscape. One is for development, one is for testing, and one is for quality. You can see it here, dev, QA, and production. DEV is for development, QA is for quality assurance, and PRD is for production. In many customers, you can see people also use the same name as it is, dev, QAS, and production. So let's say you have only one SAP system, it's quite easy to use. Otherwise, we could also say D, then another number to represent the product, and say number of the system. Here you could say that D42, T42, and P42, they different it like numbers, and the D is means development, T is testing, P is for productions. Like this, you can have different numbers. Again, depends on how many systems you have, how do you want to differentiate the systems. If you see here in the development system, you have three clients. You can see customizing, testing, and sandbox. Customizing is basically customizing as well as the program development, testing, and sandbox. What is it for testing? Let's say whenever you did any changes, customizing changes, and you wanted to check whether the changes what you have done is correct, then you can transport internally to a different client and test it there, whether your changes is working correctly or not. Why can't we do it in this client? This client may be somebody else, may be working on the same client, and some configuration has been changed during the time when you are testing, then it could be a problem. That's the reason we have a test client where you can test. And you have something called sandbox. What is the sandbox? Sandbox is basically kind of a playground where you can play around with the system. Play around in the sense, let's say you have a typical requirement from the customer that you want to do some customizing, but the functional consultant is not sure whether the customizing which they are trying to do can work or not. So basically what you want to do is you wanted to do this customizing and you want to test it whether it's going to work or not. So for that, they can directly do these customizing changes in the sandbox system and test it whether the solution is going to work. For this, we will have a sandbox client. But remember, we can't do program development in the sandbox client, because if you make any changes in the program, it will going to affect the entire client. You can't do programmatic changes as a sandbox. Like you cannot like create some test program or modify the existing program and just test it in the development system. That will affect the entire system. Let's say if it is a complex landscape, in that case, what we will do, we will create another one system here, which is called the sandbox system. The sandbox system will be a separate system itself where you can change ABAP programs or any other things and check whether the solution is going to work. So in that case, again, it will be four system landscape. Okay, the sandbox system will be standing separately, and it can be also copied from the development and create a sandbox system. Then let's say, what is QA system? QA system is where once you completed any changes, you will transport these changes into the QA system where you can test, the user or the business can test this solution or the change which we have done is correct as per their requirement and confirm the quality of the changes is correct. That is for the QA system. Now what you may think, then why can't we just test in the development system itself? It is possible. You can do that in a separate client and development system and you can test it. But what kind of data what we have here is not consistent. The sense, whenever you are testing any changes, you need to have the live data. So in order to have live data, that is better we have a separate quality system In general, this quality system will be a copy of the productive system. Means in a bigger landscape, this quality system will be refreshed or copied from the productive system in a periodic basis. It could be once in a year, or it could be in 6 months, every 6 months or every quarter it will be copied from the productive system. Copied means it will be copied, and some of the data you can delete it, like sensitive data you can delete it like this, or you can also do data scrambling. That's also possible, that SAP have different tools that you can scramble the data. You will still have the data, but it's not a real data, like this. So for that, we will have a quality system. In general, some of the cases you will also have one client called training client, the quality system. You will also have some data. Let's say a new project going live or new employees coming, then you need to train them. So for that, you will have also a training client, which could be also in the quality system. It is, of course, we can have a separate system for training. That is not a problem. However, this is a typical scenario if you wanted to have a 3-system landscape, but you don't have any big challenges in your landscape, then you can have it like this. So once the quality is tested, then everything is fine. Then the transport, that is the package, will be sent to the productive system. We will see how the transport is working. Generally, whenever you do any changes in the development system or in the SAP system, the changes can be collected in the transport request, and it can be transported into different system. We will see how the transport system works later. So this is the way the changes will be transported from your development system to productive system. Now let us see transport request and task. What is a transport request? Transport request is something where you can collect the changes and transport from one place to another place, means one system to another system. In our previous slide, we have seen different system landscape. So the changes what you are doing from the development system, if you want to transport to the quality and productive system, then you need to create a TR. You can also transport changes from one entire landscape to a different landscape. Let's say you are working in one system, you have created some program, you wanted to send it to somebody else, then there also you can create TR. The TR can be exported to a file, and that file could be sent it to different system, and then you can import that one into a different system. We will come to that, because that is also one of the basis tasks, the transport handling. How these files are being saved, we will come to that one in a later session, how to set up the transports and all these things. Now we are going to understand how the transport TR will work. If you see here in the diagram, we have a project manager who owns a TR. Okay, in general, the TR will be owned or released by the project managers. It is depending on the situation or the way how the project is managed. So it is not necessary it has to follow this same method. Let's say in this case we have 3 different people doing some changes in the SAP system. Here we have 3 different TRs which they are working. For example, this particular person making some change in the task of this TR. The TR is the header level, and you have task inside the TR. Let's say this is the request number. You can see it here. This is the request number. Inside the request, you can have multiple tasks. This multiple task can be assigned to different people. So it is not necessary that you need to create transport record for every individuals or every changes. You can collect different tasks and can be handled by different people. For example, if you see it here, TR1 have one task. This is similar to this one. Okay, this task is presently worked by this person. Okay, they are doing some changes in this specific task. If you see another TR which has 2 tasks, the same user is also doing some changes in this task as well. And you can see in the same TR you have another task which somebody else is working. Okay, in the third scenario, you have one person working in one TR and one task. So if you have multiple TRs with different tasks, the same person can use, or single TR with different tasks can be shared by different people, or you can also have TR and task specific for one person. If you see it here, this TR is owned by test user and also the task is assigned to test user. You can also reassign this task to different person. So it is possible. So it is important to know how these tasks are built, how this can be used. Let's go to our system, then we will understand this more clear. So we are in our SAP system. Let's go to the transaction SE09. Okay, this is transport organizer. From here you can create TR. If you can see it here, you can say create TR. You can also search request types, workbench request or customizing request or transport of copies. So for example, here what we can do, we can search also the TRs which is used by the specific user. Our user is trainer 01. So if you, let's say we wanted to search all the customizing and workbench TR which has been changed or which has been created by this user, or let's say which has been owned by this user, then select this option. Say we can also say whether it's modifiable or release. Modifiable means that user is still working on this TR, but it is not released. Released means it is released for the next step or released for importing into different system. Okay, so once modification is completed, somebody has to release the TR in order to transport the changes to a different system. So let's search whether we have any TRs for this user. Say display. Here you can see there is some TR is been created by this user. You can see this is a transport request. Okay, this is a transport request. Under the transport request you have task. Okay, so this transport request basically a test transport request. Here you have some customizing tasks. You can also create workbench task inside. Okay, if you want to create a task, then you need to create it under this specific transport request. If you see here, if you open it here, then you can see what is inside. You can see there is a role and some table contents. Okay, there is a role as well as some table contents. You can see a overview of what is inside this TR here. This tick mark means this particular task has been released. Okay, but the TR as a whole is not yet released. If they have to release it, they will select the TR or the task, then select this track button, release directly, then it will release the TR. So once the TR is released, then you cannot make any modification in this particular object. So if you still need to make modification, then you need to create a new task or new TR. Why do we need that? Because once you release the transport, then the specific workbench object especially, then it is available for somebody else for modification. Until unless the changes is not released, means that the specific object or specific program can only be edited by that person who is working on this object. Okay. Now you can also have proper versions when you are releasing. Let's say 3 or 4 persons are working in the same program for different requirement, but you need to transport the changes based on the sequence the program is being developed. Otherwise it can be overwritten by the older version. So that's the reason we have the release policy. So based on the release policy, then it will be imported in the same sequence. So we need to check that. This is how we can handle the TRs. So let's say if you see, let me remove this modifiable and say release and display. You can see there is another TR which was already created by this user, which is already released. It will only show you what is released. Let me select both. release and modifiable, then it should display two TRs at the same time. Okay, this is a workbench TR and this is a customizing TR. Okay, that means this may have a program, so this have so many objects, so this could be a program, another could be a some table entries. Basically it's a role. So if you wanted to see exactly what is inside the TR, if you double click here, you can see what is the objects inside the specific TR. You can see the short description, it's a role, this is the object, and this is the object name. Okay, you can also see a property which will show you where is the source client, which client actually is coming from, and who is the owner of it, what is the status, and when it was changed last time. And you can also see documentation. This is also quite useful. So if you want to keep track of what was changed in specific change request, then this will be the best place to document the changes, because whenever we are releasing, or the person who is releasing or approving these changes to productive system, if they like to see what is the changes exactly done in the specific TR, then they can read in this document. That will be very helpful, because it may not be practically possible to see all the changes if the TR is quite big, because you may change a lot of programs and different logics and you add it in one TR. So one person, if they have to review everything, then practically it may not work. So if they want to have an overview of what is being changed in the specific TR, it's better to document it. Okay. This is how we can manage a transport request and the task. Now let us see what is a workbench request. As we discussed before, the workbench request or the transport request or the collection of changes which is basically related to the repository changes. So let's say if you are making any changes in the program or you are creating a new program, then it will be called as workbench request. Or let's say we are changing a table structure, or we are creating a new table, then it will be a workbench request. In this case, you can see the flow, how this transport request will be managed. You can see this request is created, and you also create an object. It could be, let's say, a program, and assign to a package. Package is basically each development or each changes or each repository object has to be classified by a package, whether this package is belong to what application, or let's say is it related to SD, or it's related to HR, or this is a customer owned package. Like this we can assign to a package. This will be done by developer. Then that object can be assigned to the request, then close the development. That means, let's say we created the program, everything is fine, then we close the development. That will be also done by the developer. Then we release the task, not the request. So the task is first we will release the task, then the project lead or the development lead will release the request. This is also quite important. When you release the request, what is going to happen, that it will create some files in the operating system of SAP system. Okay, that is called transport request file. That will be sent to the transport directory. It's a standard SAP functionality. So these files also can be copied and moved to different SAP system. Okay, so this is what is going to happen whenever you release a transport request. There will be some files which will be created in the transport directory of the SAP system. We will see how to manage or how to create this transport directory in our coming sessions. This is basically to give you an idea how the transport is going to work. Here you can also see something called locking mechanism. So whenever you do any workbench related activity means that whenever you create a program or a change a program, that specific object will be locked by this specific developer who is going to change it now. Otherwise, what happens is that have a program, uh, two people are changing the same program, then you will have a problem how we reconcile this program. So we have the locking mechanism in SAP. So whenever a user or that specific object is assigned to a task or TR which is not yet released, that means that is worked by the specific developer, then it will be locked. Unless the TR is released, this specific object will not be available for other developer for any changes. That's what this locking mechanism means. Now let's see customizing request. In case of customizing request, you don't have locking mechanism because basically the customizing request is generally a kind of table entries. You do not have a program or a table structure where you are going to change entire way how it is going to work. Okay. So basically these are all table entries. So you don't really no need to have a locking mechanism there, and because this also will not have any version control. Okay, so we create the request and do the customizing, then you assign the changes to a request. Means uh, once you do a change and when you go to save the change, then it will ask you which request you want to assign the change, then you can select the request. That's the reason it's coming second. Then you customizing completed, then you will release the task, then your project manager or a project administrator will release the request. Once you release the request, then the TR will be created. Okay, this is the way customizing request is managed. Now let us see how the three system landscape works in terms of transporting the TRs. We've seen what is that three system landscape, how the TRs can be managed. Here we have three system landscape: development and quality and production. Here you see common transport directory. Common transport directory is basically an operating system folder where you keep all the transport related files. Okay, you can see here development system. Here you can see from the database, you can see export. Means whenever you release any transport request, it will export the TRs to an transport directory. That means it will create a file which contains the detail or the informations of that specific object. So all the changes, all the programs, everything will be accumulated in a file that will be exported into the transport directory. So after the TR is being exported to the transport directory, then the TR can be imported in any system. In general, what happens is once the transport is released and the TR is created, this can be automatically imported in the quality system. This could be automatically imported or you can also do manual import. In general, we just automatically import in the quality system. Once the program is tested, everything is fine, then it will be imported into productive system manually by the basis administrator based on approval from the owner or from the project manager. Okay. Let's go to our system and see how a TR can be created. We are in our ECC system. Let's go to transaction PFCG. Let's create a role. Okay, is a test A02. Create a single role. Let's say test role. Go to menu. This is a way to create the role. So let's add a transaction called SM50 and SM51. Assign. Then you need to go to authorization, change authorization. Now it asks whether you want to save the role. Say yes. Okay, now the role is being created. Let's go back. We need to save this. Go back again. So in order to transport the role, just simply click here, transport the role, execute, and say OK. Let me remove this. So let me create a new transport request, role transport. Okay, so this is my transport. This is the TR number ECC K9000022. Okay, let me go to the transaction SC09. That is the transport organizer SE09. Let's say display. This is the TR which we created now. So we were going to release the TR. Okay, let's assume the development is completed. I want to release the TR. We need to first release the task, then release the TR. If you release the TR first, it will not allow you to release it because the task is not at release. You can see it here. The task is not at released. First, we need to release the task. So let me release the task. Then you can release the TR. Okay. Now you can see the TR is released. It says the object is no longer locked. So when the tick mark means the TR is released. So what we will do now, if you see here, go to PFCG, you can see the role, right? So let's go and see whether this role is available in another client. So the client which we are going to use, we can use the client 000. So we have only two clients. Let's go to client 000. The trainer user is not created in this client. Let me log in with the trainer user and try whether we have the user. You can see the user is not available. However, whenever SAP deliver, there will be two standard users which will be delivered by SAP. One is SAP star, another one is DDIC. So we can log in with this one. Okay, I'm logging with this user. Go to PFCG and let me look for that role. This is the role which we have created and display. You see the role does not exist. Okay, because the role which we have created is a customizing change or customizing object which will not be available in other client. Let's create a workbench. Okay, let's create a program. Let's say SE38. This is a transaction to create a program. So I'm going to create a program. ESET hello program 1. Okay, let's say create. Okay, then we need to provide a title. Let's say test program hello. Okay, we need to enter the type. So this is basically a executable program. Then let's select the usage. Let's say this is a test program. The application, here we can specify the application, or let's say basis, and let's say save. Okay, then it will ask you the package which we discussed before. So here we don't have a package. Let's say local object. That means we do not transport this one, just for our demo purpose only. Generally you need to specify what package. So let's say it's a local object, so it will not ask you to include in the tr. Now you can see where we write a program. Then let's write the comment. Let's say write hello everyone, welcome to basis training. Okay, so let me save this and activate the program. The program is activated. Now go back and execute this program. Okay, you can see this is the output of the sport program which we have created. Now this is the program which we have created. Now we are in client 001. Let's go to the client 00. So now if you see, now we are client 000. Let's go to the transaction SC38. And call the same program and try to execute. You can see the program is available in this client also. That means it is a Workbench object which will be available in all clients. Okay, with this we are coming to end of this particular session. Thank you very much for listening. I will see you in the next session. Bye bye.